All right.
So, first of all, please tell the crowd, did you run yesterday? And if so, from where to where?
I think I know what you're getting at. It wasn't yesterday. Yesterday I just ran a little bit on the wharf in DC. But the day before, I finished a board meeting at 5:30, and I changed into my running clothes, and I ran to DCA and went straight into Terminal 2 and boarded my flight. Board meeting ended at 5:30, and I made a 7 p.m. flight, so the change, the run, everything. Yeah.
How far is that, just out of
It
curiosity?
was like 4 miles.
Yeah. In traffic. So you've been chased. I have to lead off with this question because you were once chased by a lemur.
Okay.
Where were you and what on earth?
Right, so there aren't a lot of lemurs, and this actually caused the fact checker some consternation. Were you in Madagascar? No, I was on Necker Island. So Richard Branson's private island, and I was helping moderate an AI event, and they have lemurs there. And I was running at 5 in the morning, and one kind of came after me and chased me. So I said to the fact checker, yes, I have been chased by a lemur.
I mean, so you've been chased also by New York City police, I think it was? Or no, which?
It's New Hampshire. So it was very weird. I was pulled over. They thought I was an escapee from a prison. I had long hair back then. I don't know where I was running, just on the side of the road. And it was a weird place for a runner to be. And they thought I was an escapee. And so they pulled me over and were interviewing me quite a bit.
Okay, this is my last pure curiosity because your book is just fascinating, but I came away with 100 million questions. Another one of which is, how do you train for mountain running in Brooklyn?
Not easy, right? But you do what you can. And so there's a bunch of rocks if you run towards Battery Park. And I used to work at Condé Nast. And so I would run from the Freedom Tower, and I would run to the West Side Path. And there's this pile of rocks, and I would run up and down the pile of rocks. And then I would, when I'm going through Chinatown, I would jump over the boxes in the street, and then I would set little balance challenges. I would run across a crosswalk like it's an agility ladder, or I would try to when you're mountain running, you have to have really firm balance. And so I don't if I were on the stage, I would try to run on the black line without falling off. And so you try to set these little balance challenges. And then you try to run in the hills in Prospect Park, but most of my running is from my house to my office. And so it's not easy to really get the mountain running skills in.
Yeah. And yet somehow you found a way to do it.
Well, except I'm relatively bad at mountain running. Running down mountains, I'm quite slow compared to people who run the same marathon time, run much faster in general in mountain races than I do.
It strikes me that one of the things this book is about, it's about family, it's about sports, but the main thing to me that it was about is improvability and the fact that so many of us stop, right? Your nickname for a while among your friends was Mr. 243, right? Because that was the time.
Nice.
You ran that time for how many years? A decade.
For 12 years, yeah.
Yeah. And then suddenly you start making these big leaps. We're really limiting ourselves, aren't we, in terms of the artificial fences that we're setting up for ourselves?
Well, that's really the goal of the book, right? The process of the book started when I was trying to think through how I had run all these 2:43 marathons in my 30s, and then run a 2:29 marathon, which is much faster at 44, which is not the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to go the other direction. And I was trying to think through, because it wasn't I didn't know how to train in my 30s. I ran hard. It wasn't I didn't care. And it wasn't I was slow. I was an obsessive runner, and I just ran 240 after 240 after 240. And so the genesis of the book was trying to figure out, why is it that I was able to do this, contravening what should have been happening?
And you have this moment where you've actually just run the best time of your life, and you're trying to figure out why, and it makes you literally stop running and sit on a bench.
Yeah, so that's if there's a single moment that led to this book, it's that. So I was running, it was a few months later, because I remember it was cold. So I run the 2:29 in October of 2019, and I was still going to the office, which meant it was before March of 2020. So it's somewhere in that window. And I was trying to think through why I had gotten so much faster. And So the genesis was that when I was 30, I had run my first 2:43 marathon, and then I'd been diagnosed with thyroid cancer, right? You still see the scar right there. And it's been very hard, and dealing with mortality for the first time in my life, and multiple surgeries and radiation treatment. And then 2 years later, I had recovered fully, and I ran the New York Marathon again, 2007, and I ran another 2:43. And when I was running across the Brooklyn Bridge, then 13 years afterwards, I realized, oh, wait, I had run all those 2:43s because all I had cared about was being as fast as I had been before I got sick.
Right.
You know, and I hadn't allowed myself to imagine that I could be faster. And because I hadn't allowed myself to imagine I could be faster, I hadn't gotten faster. And that's an interesting observation and process for anybody who feels, you know, wonders whether they're like, you could be much better at this thing. Like, are you holding yourself back because of something inside of you, right? Is what's holding you back the actual physical, biological limits? Like, no human can run faster than 2 hours. I certainly can't, right? But what was holding me back from going from 2:43 to 2:29? It was like mostly a fear of, or just I had limited myself in thinking that I could only be as good as I had been before I got sick.
Right. And you have this fascinating, I mean, I've been a sports writer for more years than I care to actually say in public.
They said 30.
It's, yeah, somewhere, decades, let's just say decades. So I've been doing this for decades, and I had never come across, and I feel like I've read everything about basic improvability in sports, whether performance enhanced or not, but I had never come across what you describe. You have this fascinating line where you say, you talk about a couple of studies that show that fatigue is a brain-derived emotion.
Yeah.
First of all, the idea that fatigue is an emotion, okay, that's intriguing in and of itself, and so I want to talk to you about that. But also the fact that fatigue is a brain-derived experience, period. Can you explain what that means in those studies that you refer to in the book? Because fatigue, I mean, none of us have that much ability to relate to you running a 50-mile, you know, ultramarathon or even a marathon. All of us know what it's like to be tired.
Right. Well, so the fatigue that it's talking about in that paper, that line comes from a paper by Tim Noakes. He's not talking about sleep fatigue. He's talking about like fatigue in endurance races. And it's an incredibly complicated concept because when you think about, for those people who are runners, or even if you hike or do some kind of endurance or bicycle, what is it actually that makes you tired, right? Like, what is it that makes you go slower? And my working hypothesis is that it's not actually a real physiological reaction. You know, when I was young, I was like, oh, it's the buildup of lactic acid. But why would the buildup of lactic acid kind of make you feel the way you feel? What it is, I'm convinced, is just your brain, right? And your brain really doesn't want you to lose homeostasis. Like, it doesn't want you to die, right? And for good reason. And so it's keeping track of you. And so what's happening while you're working out and while you're riding your bike or while you're running is your brain is running a set of calculations. And it's got like a thermostat dial. And it's measuring, okay, how much exertion has happened, right? How hydrated is this person? How hot is it? How I don't know whether you say I or them or whatever, but because the brain and the body are sort of separate in this. But the brain is measuring how hydrated you are, how hot you are, what your heart rate is, how heavily your breathing is, like whether you've stepped on a rock the wrong way. And it's then deciding, okay, wait, I'm a little scared that you won't be able to maintain this effort for the amount of time you need to. And so then it sends a pain signal, which is why for a lot of people running the New York Marathon on Sunday, they're going to go out there, and the first thing that's going to hurt is going to be like their nose, right? Or their shoulder, right? And your brain will just kind of like send these signals to different parts of your body, but nothing has happened to your nose, right? And nothing has happened to your shoulder, and probably nothing has happened to your knee. It's just a way of your brain trying to slow you down. And so once you realize that, I read in the book that then you're playing a game of hide and seek, but you're playing it with yourself. And It's pretty hard because you have to use your brain to trick your brain in order to get through that.
I mean, the thermometer concept is really, really fascinating. Like the great throwing coach, Tom House, who coached Nolan Ryan as a pitcher and then coached Tom Brady as a thrower in football, he's explained in really articulate terms that your decelerator muscles, you're only as fast as your decelerators will allow you to be, for the same reason, because your brain really won't let you accelerate or improve if you don't have the ability to safely stop yourself. So it's not going to let you rip your arm out by throwing too fast if it can help it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a similar
It's
sort
totally
of,
similar. It's totally similar, right? Your body will, like, it's a part of what you need to do. It's like almost like you have to build up your own self-confidence. Like to run a marathon at faster than 6 minutes per mile, you have to convince yourself that you can run a marathon at faster than 6 minutes per mile, right? And so you have to do workouts at faster than 6 minutes per mile. And you have to like do enough stuff that your brain is not scared to go out and try that.
right. The big wave surfer, Laird Hamilton, who rides these, 80, 100-foot monsters, he told me once that your body doesn't actually know exactly what's stressing you, that your body doesn't know if you're stressed because there's an 80-foot wave coming at you or because your teenage daughter took the car keys and she's not home yet, right? Or because you're a surfer trying to give a speech in front of a bunch of corporate, CEOs. So my question is, when you're ultra marathoning, that stress, is there a differentiator for you? Like when you know that you've reached a point where you're frightening yourself because it is so painful and it is so difficult. I mean, how do you know when the stress is bad for you? I guess is what I'm saying.
That's the line you have to find when you're running, because there is real physiological harm that you can do to yourself in an ultra marathon or in a marathon, and you can. I was running in Prospect Park maybe 3 weeks ago, and I was getting ready for the marathon. I'm going to run 20 miles at 6:30 pace, right? And I go out there, and like my hamstring starts to flare, and I'm like, it's just my brain, I know this, brain-derived motion. And then suddenly I couldn't move, right? Like my muscle is spasming, right? And I can't walk. I'm like, well, okay, no, this is no longer a brain. It's not my brain afraid that I can't do this. Like something is actually wrong, right? And it is just my left hamstring, right? And has been my left hamstring the whole time during this workout. And so it would have been better off if I'd realized that early in the run as opposed to when I was 3 miles from my house. Yeah. So you do have to like cultivate an awareness, and you can't be like a fool and just think that you can like trick yourself through everything and that somehow, there are no limits. But on the other hand, I had this fun experience where I coach my 11-year-old son's soccer team in running. So on Monday nights, I go to the track in Queens. And first time I go and I run with them, every single one of them gets a cramp. I'm like, got a cramp, right? I can't run faster. I'm like, cramps are mostly fake, guys, right? It's like mostly in your head, which is true. Like cramps are mostly in your head. Not completely. Now none of them get cramps. And in fact, one of them starts to cramp, another one will be like, cramps aren't real. And now they're all running 6-minute miles.
Yeah, right. Well, the tennis player Carlos Alcaraz had cramps in his first French Open final against Novak Djokovic. And he said afterwards, it was just the tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really a physiological, it was a mental. The great Pat Summitt, basketball coach, I remember seeing her in a preseason workout. She had all of her players doing wall sits with like really heavy weights. And the kids are sitting there against the wall and they're like trembling and sweat is pouring down their faces. And she would go to each one of them and she would say in her Southern accent, is it physical or is it mental?
That's what I'm going to do to each of the kids. I'm going to have them like do planks and walk around saying that.
I feel like a lot of the book is an exploration for you in trying to figure out why you run. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. So how can you have run all that time, all those years, without knowing exactly why? Take us through your basic running experience. Let's talk about your dad. You run, this is incredible. For those of you who haven't read the book, you learn early in the first few pages that Nick ran a mile for the first time when he was 5 years old, right, with your dad.
Yeah, which, seemed totally reasonable until I had a 5-year-old. Then it was like, wow, kind of weird. I think I actually ran like 3 miles with him when I was 5 years old, which seems bonkers. And it can't have been that I misremembered the years because he left when I was 6. So it could not have happened when I was older than 6. So I started running. I ran a little bit with him when I was 5 or 6, and then I would run just, gym class and like with him when I'd go and visit him a couple miles here or there. But it wasn't part of my identity or something important to me until high school. And then in high school, I was cut from the JV2 basketball team, not the varsity, not the JV, but the JV2, and joined the track team. And that's when this started. And so then I was mediocre. I then had one amazing race, and suddenly I was good. And then for the next 2 years, I was good. And then I went to college, and I was mediocre again. And then I kind of stopped for a while. And I would run, just as a social thing. And I would run in the mountains because I loved running. And then in my 20s, I started trying to run marathons again. And it was a way, to your question of why I run, like, I ran in high school because I was good at it. And it gave me status and stature and was going to get me into college, right? Like, and it was euphoric, right? Like, you're running in high school and you can express an intensity of emotion that you can't express anywhere, and you're a adolescent male, and it's a wonderful thing to do. So high school, it's easy to explain why I run. In my 20s, I think I was trying to run marathons, and my father had run a 3-hour and 1-minute marathon, and I was trying to meet that goal. I'm very, always was trying to live up to my father's expectations. I couldn't get to that, and then I suddenly got good. And then I run this 2:43 marathon, right? And then I get sick. And then in some ways after that, I was running to prove I was still alive after being sick. And so then the interesting question is why I kept going. And I think part of it was, I love it. I love the meditation. I love the discipline. I do think it adds to my full life. Like, I have I'm a kid who was always outside, but I have a job where I'm always inside. It's nice to have a little break. But I really do think it was tied in. My obsession was, I think, very much tied into how closely the sickness was to my running. Like, I really felt like as long as I kept running, I was proving to myself that I had gotten through my cancer.
Right. It's such a painful thing to do, running. I mean, it hurts every part of your body, and it hurts your brain as we...
Not anymore, now that you know about the central governor theory.
Right.
Sally, you just go out there, it's all illusory.
It's false pain, right. It's a veneer of pain. It's a thin veneer if we just push through it, right? But seriously though, so lactate is painful, right? And so one of the things you do when you train is you're increasing your lactate threshold. VO2 max is your oxygenation of your body. That's another painful thing, right? It's pretty searing. So getting better does have to include a lot of physical discomfort, right? If you don't want to.
And this is important, right? Because some people think they can get better without hurting, and that's wrong, right? And I do talk about how to push pain aside and how to think about it, and some of it's brain-derived. But a lot of it is real and it is physical, and you have to push yourself to a very hard limit. And often when I'm training, right, when I'm training for a marathon, I will just remind myself, right? I train hard 3 times a week, right? It's not that much time where you have to put yourself into agony, right? And so the other day I was running 5 by a mile, and it hurts to run 5 by a mile as hard as you can. It really hurts, and you're breathing hard, and you want to stop, and you've done 4, and you think that's enough. And then you remind yourself, there are very few days where you have to run really hard, but if you do them, you will get much better. And so I kind of talk to myself about that when I'm going through this process.
You talk about a wheelbarrow of pain and pushing it away. How does that work? Does that work? How do you...
Works for a little bit. I mean...
how do you mentally get rid of pain? Because that's the other most common experience in this room and online is pain. Fatigue and pain, all of us know about that.
So what I mean with the wheelbarrow is that sometimes when I'm running, I do 2 things to try to cope with how I feel when I'm running hard for a long race. One is I try to they're kind of opposite. And I either really try to associate, I really try to get inside my body, and I'll think about, okay, here my toes are hitting now, my midfoot is hitting now, my heel now, I'm bouncing off, now I'm in the air, this is what my Achilles tendon is doing, and I'm try to be extremely aware. And then I think about each little thing that hurts, right? Okay, this hurts here. And then I think about kind of carting it away in a wheelbarrow. So I'm trying to really understand what is happening physiologically to me as I move through space. But then other times, I'm dissociating. I'm just trying to imagine that my mind is outside of my body. And I'm actually I'm not in this race. I'm not doing this hard thing. I'm just traveling through the forests of New England as I did a child, right? I'm just bounding through the woods. And so it's this combination, and you can use either of those 2 I guess there's a third strategy where sometimes I'm all right, I am now just meditating, right? And it's right foot, right foot. I often will do it in 3s, so it's right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And when you can kind of focus on a meditative mantra, you can put some of the pain and agony to the side and just sort of focus on moving forward. And then there are times where you can kind of get this at the end of a hard race or a hard workout where you're not thinking anything, right? Where you're like incapable. This may happen on Sunday at the New York Marathon where you're going around, you're in Central Park South, and you're done. I often think you begin a race with 100 pennies in your pocket and you want to spend the last one when you cross the finish line, but maybe you spend it, by Marcus Garvey Park, right? And so then you're like in this wall of pain and you have like no peripheral vision and you can't hear anything on the side, and all you're doing is like, I'm just going to put my foot forward and I'm just going to keep going. So you have these different strategies for getting through, what happens as you physiologically fall apart in a race.
I mean, the bottom line, though, is that you do get through it, right? And that's the interesting thing that I think athletes have taught me, but I'm not sure it's always translated to the public, which is that things can hurt so good, right? I mean, overcoming pain, there's an incredible, like most athletes tell me about pain, that it is so cleansing that it simplifies everything because you can't think about anything else. That so when you're running, like it's very meditative for you, it sounds like, and maybe you do go through a thing where you're working out something from the office, but in general, it sounds as though it's a very sort of meditative experience for you.
They're different modes, right? So if I'm just commuting to work and I'm running like a 9-minute mile across the Manhattan Bridge, I'm probably listening to a podcast about AI policy, and I'm just like, that's just transportation, right? And so, but when I'm doing a workout or when I'm running in the woods, that's when it's meditative, and that's when my mind is getting freer, or that's when I'm like relaxing, and that's when I'm kind of reaching a mental state that I don't in the rest of my life.
Right.
And I also, on pain, there's this other feeling of pain that I love, which is when you're really training hard, and I don't train as hard as the athletes you interview, but when I'm training really hard, you can just feel this. I feel like it's like embers glowing, right? Where you're like, your leg just, like you stand up and like it kind of hurts to stand up, and you realize, okay, it hurts to stand up because I'm training really well right now, right? I'm like right at the edge. I'm not getting injured, but I'm training really hard, and I like that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a feeling of total spentness, right? Like the one thing you have is you're pretty sure you've spent your last penny. That has to be a satisfying sensation.
Yeah, if you can spend your last penny when you cross the finish line, that is one of the best feelings ever, right? It's so hard to manage that, though, because it's so easy to spend them too early.
Right. What's the worst you've ever felt with this endeavor? Like, let's go to ultra marathoning, because like there's this episode in the book where you really try your first one, and you puke, basically, right? I think you puked.
I puke, but that's not the worst of it. I mean, that might be the one where I run my first 50-miler, and I'm trying to set the American record, and I run the first 31 miles on pace, and then something starts to go wrong, and then I'm like eating a goo, and there's like snow on the course, and I slip, and then my Achilles hurts, and I'm like trying to push the pain away, and then I realize there's something wrong with my Achilles. And so my leg feels horrible, my body feels horrible, I've probably thrown up, and I pull into a little tent on the side. But the reason I felt so horrible, I don't think was, I just felt like a failure, right? Because I pull off and I'm like dropping out of this race, and I was so confused, right? And I had run 37 miles, and like I sat in the tent for like 15 minutes. I'm eating like peanut butter bars and hot cocoa, and I've got this blanket on me, and I'm like, what am I doing, right? Like I was like still in third place after sitting there for 15 minutes, right? I was like 9 hours ahead of other runners, right? Like,
right.
All these, I'd met an old guy who was like planning to run it in 24 hours. I was like, that dude's gonna finish. Like, what are you doing dropping out, right? And so I was like angry at myself. And I felt like I right in the book, I describe it as being a Labrador in a race for wolves. That I just didn't have the mentality in an ultra race to know how to get through that, because you're supposed to get through that. Mm-hmm. And in retrospect, it's like somewhat ambiguous, because I did come home and the doctor did look at my Achilles and was like, if you had kept running, you would have ruptured it. So maybe I made the right choice.
So the thermometer kicked in.
The thermometer kicked in.
Yeah.
And the thermometer kicked in, and I was angry at the thermometer, and I was like having an intense debate with the thermometer. Right. I guess that's what happened.
So look, there's a big difference between 5 miles and marathoning. There's got to be an even bigger difference between marathoning and ultramarathoning, like 26 miles to 50. What took you there? Why? Particularly at, how old are you?
I'm 50, yeah.
I mean, 50 miles at 50. Like, do you just feel this, like, need to go farther all the time, or what is that? What's happening?
Well, so what happened was I had been running marathons, and I was very happy running marathons, and then COVID hit, and there were no more marathons. And ran a marathon like by myself in Prospect Park, just 13 loops of the Prospect Park West loop, which was pretty dorky. But there were ultra races, and I was asked if I would pace Des Linden, this American legend, in a 50K. She was going to try to set the 50K world record. I was like, great, I'll go pace Des Linden. Sounds awesome. And so that was my first foray. And then I start running longer distances, and it kind of got back to the mountain running, right? Remember I was talking earlier about jumping over the mushroom crates and going through? And there's something spiritual, and there's something you can feel about the world and about your body when you're out there for a really long time in the mountains. And so I figured I would try it. And then I started entering ultra races and loved them, and now I might go even further.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds as though there is an intense spiritual element to this for you, given to you, I think, by your father, yes?
Well, I don't know if it was given to me by my father. I do believe that my father used running as a way to hold his life together, and I do believe that running is a meditative, spiritual practice for me. Not spiritual in the sense that I'm like understanding the life of Jesus Christ, but like spiritual in the sense that I am kind of stepping outside of my body and feeling things more deeply than I feel at other points in my life. So I absolutely think I get that from running.
There's something that your father gave you that was over your bed from Maximus. That the book title is taken from.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that passage and sort of what it means to you? Because it's really a beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful
I love this.
writing.
So for a long time, my book was called Run for Your Life, which is fine, right? It's a good title, but it's like kind of generic, right? Like the manuscript when I wrote the proposal was Run for Your Life. And I spent all this time like trying to come up with a new title. And I was like, well, I'll call it Time to Run, and I couldn't get it. And then I was in, we have a little spot up in the Catskills, and my father had this print, and it's from Maximus of Tyre, the Greek philosopher, and it's about finding love in the world and finding meaning in the world. And what it says, I don't have it in front of me, but it says that, man can't name God, can't describe God, and so what we do is we find the things that we love and we find meaning in, and we call them after God, or we think of them as God. And he says, whether it's the voice of your earthly lover, or the sound of a lyre, or a running ground. And I was looking at that, and my dad, even better, my dad had given it to me to pay off a loan. And so it's this amazing print with these Ben Shahn heads at the top, and I had somehow had it on my wall since I was 25 years old, and I'd never thought about the line, a running ground. And then I looked at it and it just hit me like a thunderbolt. Like, this is the title. The title has to be The Running Ground. And so that's where it came from.
And it does sound from the book like there are pieces of ground that you love, that there are pieces of running ground, like whether it's a mountain, whether it's...
yeah, and there are places where I have run, and you can take me back there when I'm 90 years old and I'll just start crying, right? You take me to Holt Hill at Andover, where I went to high school, and you carry me up in my wheelchair when I'm in my 90s. Not that I'll necessarily be George Hirsch, one of the great runners of New York City history, is 91 years old, and the guy looks awesome. He's right here in the audience somewhere, but when I'm 91, I hope that I can go as fast as George Hirsch. So when I'm 115, take me up to Holt Hill, right? Or take me up Sargent Mountain, or take me in the Andover Bird Sanctuary, or take me up Kinsman Mountain, right? These places where I had spiritual awakenings, experiences where I really felt like I was at one with the world while running. Yeah. And there are places all over the world where I've gone on these runs that I just very intense emotional responses to. And those are running grounds in some ways to me. And some of them are, really beautiful places, and then some are just important places of memory, like where I ran, with my father, right? Or, whenever I go back to the track at college, where I was such a failure, but it was still a very important emotional experience. Those memories are grounded very deeply in my head.
Yeah. Your father was a brilliant man, and a reckless man, it sounds like.
Those things are both true.
Let's talk about your dad a little bit. Because,
Sure, happy to.
Because the running ground, that's beloved ground too, right?
So my dad is an amazing character and an interesting character and a hard character. He grows up in Oklahoma. He has a rough time in his childhood. He has an overbearing father who is tough on him, wants him to be a different kid than he is, wants him to be an athlete, wants him to be big and strong, and he's like kind of small and skinny, and he loves Bach, and he wants to read, and his dad wants him to be a boxer, right, and be a real man. And so my dad wants to get away, and he learns about this school called Phillips Academy Andover, and reads about it, and then applies and gets in, and says, "Dad, I'm out." And Dad's like, "No, you looks like even though you have a scholarship, you still have to pay $200. I'm not giving you the money." And my dad's like, "Haha, I made the money. I've been like riding on horseback, selling newspapers, and made $200, so I'm gone." So he goes, and it's like this incredible, admirable break, like this man like breaking out of Bacone, Oklahoma, and goes to Andover, scholarship to Stanford, Oxford Rhodes Scholarship, comes back to DC, marries my mother's prominent family. Like, this man is on fire, right? The brilliant, beloved Scott Thompson. He's like his college graduation, he's photographed by Life magazine. But then things start to get unraveled. Like he goes into academia, which might be a mistake, but he doesn't really succeed. He can't write a great book. He has these political ambitions, but he doesn't realize them. He starts to drink too much, and then he realizes he's gay. And that really gets him unraveled. And he can't really process that. But eventually he comes out of the closet, he leaves our family, and then the next 40 years of his life, he does some admirable things. Right? He's the first openly gay presidential appointee when he goes to work at the United States Institute of Peace, which is great. He's an openly gay Republican in Ronald Reagan's administration, which is amazing. But he also, he's bringing prostitutes to the house. He's, dating totally inappropriate people, including one. I was talking to my sister, and I write in the book that one of the men my father dated poisoned my dog and killed my older sister's cat. And my younger sister today was like, "You forgot that he killed my 3 cats too."
Oh my God.
Right? Like, and this guy, the person I'm talking about is actually like a very prominent person in Washington still. But like this, like psychopath, he would walk into auction houses and like just steal stuff. Like he had the veneer of a respectable person, would walk into restaurants and like steal the light fixtures, bury them at our house. Anyway, so my dad dates these like monsters, and then he starts dating like 18-year-olds he's met on the internet. It's just like appalling mess. And
Tell about the Metropolitan Club.
Oh God. Okay, so Metropolitan Club is this fancy club in Washington, like lobbyists, congressmen. You have to get in the front door. You have to wear a jacket and tie. So I go in there once. My dad has been in Asia for the last 6 weeks, and I go and there's one public computer you can use in the library, right? And this is, I don't know, maybe it's like 2003 or something. And so I go to check my email, and I open up the computer, and like this like naked young man pops on the screen, and it's like, "Hey, Scotty, what are you doing tonight?" My dad had clearly been had logged in, surfing prostitutes, and not logged out. And so everybody who had used the computer at the Metropolitan Club, like senators, Republican senators from Louisiana, had been like on this computer with like Scott Thompson's men, like saying hello to them. And nobody knew how to log out, because how do they know how to log out of Manjammer or whatever he's using? So I have to log out. And I like email my dad. I'm like, "Dad, like, what are you doing?" He's like, "I probably did those guys some good." I was like, "Oh God."
So he's a very original man. He's a very brave man in a lot of ways.
Very brave man in a lot of ways, but a force of chaos.
Yeah. And yet you find a way to stay close to him, and the running is your bond.
Running is part of the bond, yeah. So we run together. He loves my running career. He wants me to do well. He always roots for me. I'm often asked, like, how did you stay close to this guy, right? Like, he was terrible to my mother. He sued my mother constantly for no reason. He was in like hundreds of lawsuits. Everybody he did business with. He's bankrupt by the end of his life. He's mooching money off me. That's why he gave me that amazing, Ben Shahn print, to pay back a loan where I'd bailed him out of some situation. But the man loved me, right? And he was a wonderful person to talk to. And I put up with it. You know, it's very rare. I was thinking about this the other day. It's very rare to have someone in your life, and like if you're lucky, you get it from your spouse. If you're lucky, you get it from your best friend, who really wants the best for you at all times, right? Who's not like kind of sort of a little bit rooting against you, right? Who kind of sort of maybe resents a little bit your success and like, you know, maybe isn't that happy that Sally's like crushing it at the Atlantic, right? Like, you know, even people you're very close to sometimes kind of don't want that, right? And you kind of know that, right? And my dad just always wanted the absolute best for me, and 100%. And there was nothing, you know, nothing that would get in the way of his like support and love for that. And so for that, I put up with all the hookers and extortion.
Yeah. You have a lovely line in the book where you basically say that marathoning is a lot like life. It's about running through a series of sort of micro traumas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so do you kind of, was your relationship with your father a bit like that? I mean,
There's no question that I learned something from the way I managed my father that has been helpful for everything else in life. Or I don't know whether it's been helpful, it's been influential. You know, I had this, one of the most important moments of my journalistic career was when I interviewed at the Washington Monthly, right? I was 25 years old and interviewing to be the editor of the Washington Monthly, and I meet this guy, Charlie Peters, and he asks me, what is your relationship like with your father? And I say, well, my dad's an alcoholic, but we get on great, right? And it turned out like that was exactly the right answer, right? Because Charlie drank too much and he needed people who could have like sort of a father-son relationship. And learning how to manage my father and to kind of put up with the nonsense and the chaos and the stress and the everything else, I think one of my skills in life has been like sort of stoically kind of making it through while working with very difficult people, right? And like very difficult people who, like my father, are worth it, right? They're difficult people who are not worth it, but they're difficult people who are worth it, right? And
how do you figure out the worth that's from the not worth it's?
Well, they have to be great, right? But like, you can have a colleague who makes everybody cry, but writes the best stories, right? And I mean, depends how good the stories are and how many people they make cry, but like there is a balance of that that's worth it, right? And I've been pretty good at managing those relationships, and I think it was, you know, partly from working with my father. Not at the Atlantic. Everybody at the Atlantic is totally sweet and nice.
Yeah.
And welcome. Sally's worked for us for like 3 days.
It happens to be true, actually. It's a room full of lovely people.
Lovely people, yeah.
So it's like left foot, right foot, left foot.
Yeah, very much so, right? You learn to my view of how I work is pretty similar to how I run, which is you kind of go out and you do your very best and you put up with a lot of stuff and you run when it's hot and you run when it's cold and you work when you have hard colleagues and you work when you have easy colleagues and you try not to complain. You tend not to worry about, you know, what's happening here, what's happening there. You sort of assume that if you put in the work and do the best you can, things work out in the end. And I think that's, I'm sure there are lots of people who could critique that as an attitude towards life, and there are reasons why Stoicism as a life philosophy has, you know, flaws and problems, and there are weaknesses to it, but it's kind of how I live my life, and I think my running life and my working life are pretty intertwined in that way.
It definitely sounds like it. I mean, I think one of the central misunderstandings that I think most people have about all great athletes, and I'm going to classify you as a great athlete because you are the American record holder, and you are running 50 miles at 50. But I think so many people think that great athletes or successful athletes, and I think they think this about everything actually, is a matter of like 10% improvement, 20% improvement. But the Tom Bradys of the world actually become Tom Brady with 1 to 2% improvement.
Yeah.
They are in the business of the 1 to 2%, not the 10%. They might have gotten a 10% when they were in high school, right?
Right.
And your process, when you finally worked with elite coaches from Nike, which you had a chance to do because Nike just wanted to run an experiment, essentially.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the difference between coaching, like your college coaching. I'm sure you had good coaches at Stanford and at Andover. But then this Nike experience that you have is really a departure for you. And I was just curious about there's a lot of really bad coaching in the world. There's bad coaching in every office. But there's bad coaching in high school. You got really great coaching from Nike. And I'm just wondering about the marginal differences that you saw in elite coaching.
Super interesting. I mean, in fact, my coach at Stanford was the most successful coach in like American history, like the best coach ever. But he wasn't the right coach for me, right? And I interviewed him. His name was Vin Lanana, and he wins everywhere. And he came to Stanford. I was in his first recruiting class. He took a team that was 6th in Pac-10s, and we were national champions by my senior year, right? The guy was a genius. But he demanded something I couldn't give, which is total commitment, right? And he told me, I interviewed him afterwards, and he didn't remember who I was. I wasn't on the team long enough. Why should he? But he said something. He was like, every time you go to a new school, you realize it was hard at the old school. When I went to Stanford from Dartmouth, I realized it was hard to train in the winters. When I went to Oregon from Stanford, I realized it was hard that some of the kids still wanted to get A's, right? And he's like, in order to succeed in my program, you needed to like put all of academia and everything aside. And I would never have been that kid, right? I would never have done that. So I actually had the opportunity to run with the best coach in the world, but I couldn't commit enough to him for him to commit to me. So then what my Nike coach, Steve Finley, working with Joe Holder and Brett Kirby, what Finley did is he recognized that I had unrealized talent, recognized that he didn't know anything about my cancer, but recognized I had some psychological block against going faster. And then also recognized that running was not the most important thing in my life. And so he didn't say, I'm going to build a program that requires total commitment, right? And you're going to have to do, an hour of core work in the morning. You're going to have to do all this recovery work. He would just be like, on Monday, you do whatever you want. And on Wednesday, do whatever you want. On Tuesday, I'm going to ask for an hour of your time, right? I'm going to ask you to do these things. And on Thursday, I'm going to ask for an hour of your time. And on Saturday, I'm going to ask for 2 hours of your time. The rest, it doesn't matter, right? And he figured out, like, with the minimal amount of time to get the most out of me. It was very different from what Vin Lanana at Stanford would have wanted. And so Finley basically figured out me, right? And that was like the best possible coaching, right? The coach he doesn't have a system and it's like, I'm going to plug you players into my system, right? And I'm going to demand this, I'm going to demand that, and if you can't do that, then like, see ya. It was more, okay, my job is to identify Nick's life, what matters to him, where running fits in the hierarchy of things, and given those restraints, get the most out of him, and that was his genius.
I mean, how many times do we see like a quarterback in the NFL who looks terrible in one city and he goes to another city? We've got a guy who left New York and is now in Indianapolis lighting the world on fire. Yeah. Right? So it's not just about, the coaching is with a capital C, is not some cookie cutter thing, right? It's about understanding the person the human being that you're dealing with.
It gave me so much more of an appreciation for what is a brilliant coach. Like, your brilliant coach isn't like running. Anybody can give you a workout and can design like how a workout is supposed to work, but to actually understand the person, that's real genius. And I don't know, you've interviewed many great coaches across domains. And there must like Bill Belichick, right? Like, you are going to do the things my way, and if you don't do the things my way, I'm going to cut you. And like, that worked really well, right? But that usually doesn't work. Usually it's better to figure out the person.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he was probably better at understanding the men in his locker room than people think. I think there's a lot of joyless reputation in that locker room. I think they had a lot more fun than, it comes off as. But, I mean, I think actually what happened with Belichick is that he got tired of them and they got tired of him. But that's a different conversation. But back to the difference, the 1% to 2%, right? That is found in things like beet juice, right? That is found. What are some of the places where you found the 1% to 2%?
Oh, this is a fun question. Yeah, okay, so I've tried, in the last 7 years of running, I've tried so many different things, right? I've tried, I'll try everything, right? And once I became moderately well-known for running quickly, boxes just show up at my house, right? And, so the things that actually matter, the shoes matter, right? And they matter immensely, right? And for each person, there's a different kind of shoe that fits your gait, right? And what I do is I'll go to the track, put on a heart rate monitor, and I will run a mile in 6 different pairs of shoes. So I'll do 12 miles, and so each shoe I'll wear for 2 miles, right? I'll like alternate them so I'm at equal levels of fatigue. And I'll run it all at like 6:40 pace, so like reasonably quickly, but not so quickly that I'm getting tired. And then I'll measure what my heart rate and my power readings were, and whatever shoe I moved most efficiently in is the shoe I'll wear in the next race, right? So shoes matter a ton, but it's not just like, the Vaporfly 4 is the best for everybody or the Fast R3, right? So shoes matter a ton. Having accurate heart rate data matters a ton, right? If you can I wear a heart rate monitor on my bicep or on my arm, knowing that while you run gives you like a real sense of how quickly you're doing. I do think that beet juice, nitrates actually help. I think that L-citrulline actually helps. Certainly caffeine definitely helps. Creatine helps. The rest of the stuff doesn't matter, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff that like genuinely helps. Maybe L-carnitine, but it's a little shaky and there may be some heart problems with that. So that's in the supplementation. Of the other like sensors and metrics, I've run with a heat sensor, I've run with a balance pod, I've run with like, stride meters. None of that has really helped me that much. Foam rolling's super useful. I do think that saunas are becoming beneficial. Like I didn't know this until like a year ago, but I used them before my last 50 miler and I think it was beneficial. Sort of it comes first from cycling where people start taking saunas. The theory is that, in order to cool, your body is pushing all this blood to your skin, and then it creates a response that increases the amount of hematocrit inside of your body, and then blood comes back and you have more hematocrit, which means the same amount of blood can carry more oxygen, right? That's the theory. And it seems to work, and it seems to lead to very fast adaptation. In fact, I'll probably go to the sauna tomorrow with the race on Sunday. And saunas seem to work. I do think altitude definitely works if you can get yourself to altitude. Anyways, I'm sorry, everybody's probably fallen half asleep by this answer, but like those are some of the things I've done to try to like find a little bit here or a little bit there.
But it's fascinating though, because there are so many ways of finding 1% to 2%, and if you find 1% here, 1% there, 1% there, Tom Brady ran the 40 faster at age 40 than he did as an NFL draft pick, right? Yeah.
And Tom Brady, like, who's spending his evenings like doing math puzzles to try to like increase his like perception of the field.
Exactly. I mean, he would do that stuff, and he would. And he was actually a more accurate thrower his last couple of years in the league than he ever was before. I mean, he literally got more accurate every year over 18 years, but just by a little. But by the end of his career, it's
right. Whereas everybody else is going the other direction as they age. Right. He figured out this way of like constant self-improvement. I think of it as like a moving sidewalk going backwards, right? And, when you're 18 to 28 in the NFL, or 18 probably to 25, you're on a moving sidewalk going forward, and then you're 25 to 40, you're going backwards. And what Brady did is he figured out even while he's going backwards physiologically, slow it down by like eating and training the way he did.
Sandbagging.
But also do all that like mental work, and you're actually able to get better as you get older.
Yeah. We have some questions from the audience.
Awesome.
Okay, this is an interesting question because I'm not sure you actually do this, but the question is, how do you reorient or reset after reaching your goal without just setting a higher goal? And also, is it a coincidence that your book came out on Marathon Week?
I just set a higher goal if I get it. I mean, when I ran 2:29, I was like, I'm going to run 2:25, right? But then COVID hit, and then I got old and slow.
And then you ran ultra marathons.
Then I switched to ultra marathons.
Yeah. So it seems like you do keep setting ever higher.
I do. I've like different goals. I mean, I'm definitely slower. I'm 50 years old, and I'm slower than I was at 44, right? And I'm going to run the New York Marathon on Sunday, and it's going to be probably my slowest one yet. My training's been a catastrophe.
What are you aiming for?
Unclear. Like there's something weird, and I don't know if it's stress from the book launch, but like my resting heart rate is like 15 beats per minute higher than it should be right now. Like it's weird. Like it's at a level it hasn't been at in 15 years. I had a board meeting on Monday, book is coming out, training was kind of a mess anyway. So like I'm actually in a physiological state where I don't recognize myself. So I don't know. I'll probably like try to like go out at like 250 pace. But 2 months ago, I thought I was going to run 230. I was in great shape.
Yeah.
But like something is really weird with where I am physiologically right now. And then the second part of the question, no, it's not a coincidence. It came out Marathon Week. Seemed like a great time, right? I'm going to do stuff at the New York Expo, and there are a lot of runners in town. I'm all for promoting the book Marathon Week.
It's funny because there's an awareness that you register in your book. I feel like running has given you such a hyper awareness of your body, and what you just said about like your resting heart rate, and like, do you feel like it's given you a greater awareness?
Totally, it's given me. I mean, that's partly why I feel so out of whack right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't feel. I look normal, right? You know, I seem normal, right? Like, you know, but you know, I'm so hyper attuned to this data about myself and how I should feel like the week before a marathon and 4 days before a race, and I have like all of these systems of what I should be doing, and okay, like so today should be my last day of like protein loading. I'm gonna like or have extra carbohydrates, and this is what I should be doing for core work, and this is how much I should be running, and like all of that stuff is out of whack because the whole system's off right now. So it is like I've cultivated this great awareness, but it's also you cultivate awareness, and then there's like somebody puts a tennis ball under your mattress, and you're like right? Like little thing gets off, and so it's like it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. I'm guessing that your wife Danielle knows when something's off.
Yeah, she definitely knows when something's off. She's even more attuned than I am.
Yeah. So that brings us to another question from the audience, which is, running is such an individualistic sport. It's a solitary sport. So how do you carry your family along? That's partly your dad carried you along. So how do you carry your family along in this this space where you're training so heavily?
Well, so you do a couple things. And one, I try to make my running as invisible as possible to my family. And so the majority of my miles are commuting, right? I walk my youngest son to school, and then I run to the office, right? And I could take the subway, it would take the same amount of time. And then at the end of the day, I run home. Or I run to his soccer practice and meet him, and then I take him home in an Uber. And so, it's all, like, it's no different from if I took the subway. So it's invisible, right? And then when I do long runs, I do them at like 5 in the morning. And so I come home when everybody else is waking up. But of course, it's not completely invisible. And, like on Sunday at the New York Marathon, I'll be gone for multiple hours. And so there's trade-offs, right? And you make trade-offs with, my wife has a very ambitious career. She was a professional dancer. Like, she understands physical stuff. So, we have a trade-off. As to bringing them along, amazingly, like my eldest son loves to go on long hikes with me, right? So every summer we'll go on multi-day hikes in the White Mountains. We went up in Chamonix this past summer. My middle son like trains harder than I do, right? He's a 15-year-old elite soccer player, also runs on the track team, and he's out there multiple hours a day. So we're going and lifting together in the gym. We go to the sauna together and we run together, and we do that all the time. And then my little guy, also an elite soccer player, and so I'm like coaching his team in running, and we run together and we lift together, and like we'll do box jump. When I come home tonight, I'll probably do a box jump competition against him, and he'll beat me, but it's very fun.
There's a charming thing in the book where basically you, having 3 small sons actually puts you in the best shape of your life at one point, right?
This is the really interesting thing, and I didn't realize this is what was happening, but I think it's very encouraging for all the young parents in the audience. I had this crazy thing happen where I got injured in 2020. It was during COVID, because I remember I went to see a physical therapist outside, and he was like, "When was the last time you were injured?" And I was like, "I don't know. I haven't missed a day running in 10 years. I've never been injured." He's like, "You've never been injured in 10 years?" He's like, "How much core work do you do?" I was like, "None." He's like, "How much stretching do you do?" Well, I don't know. Maybe I'd like touch my toes before I go run, or touch my knees. And he was like, "How much mobility?" I was like, "I don't do any of that." And he's like, "Well, how do you move besides running?" I was like, "Oh, well, I play like Nerf basketball with my kids, and I I'll like throw them in the pool. And every single day we've been together, I've like done something with my kids. Like we play hallway soccer, right? And we've knocked over the vase yesterday and broke it, but we had a lot of fun." And then he was like, "Well, that's why you haven't gotten hurt." And he's like, "And when did you say you were last hurt?" And I was like, 10 years ago. And he's like, "How old is your son?" I was like, 10. And it was a realization that basically, as soon as my kids were born, I wrestled with them so much that I was doing like all the eccentric motion and mobility work that is the best way to not get injured. And so once they like grew up a little bit, then I'm suddenly at risk of getting injured because I can't throw them around anymore. I need to have more children. I guess I have to adopt.
You have a really resonant sentence in the book that is probably one of my biggest takeaways from the book. And you say early in the book, every action that you do is on its way to creating a habit.
Yeah.
right? I think so many of us are on default all the time. We're sort of going through the motions and we're trying to get stuff done. And we don't realize that we're creating habits in almost everything we do, if we're mindful about it. And that's going to be my big takeaway. But I feel like that's one of the things that running has done for you is give you a method and a sort of a set of habits. Have those transferred to your work life? I mean, you've got such a big work life, you know.
I do think they do. I mean, I do believe this. You know, I believe very much that everything you do creates a habit, right? And like, as you move through a day, most of what you do is kind of automatic, right? The way the way you greet people, the way you listen, like where you pay attention, where your focus goes, how you walk, and you know, how you hold your body when you walk. It's all these like ingrained habits. And so, you know, you're constantly sort of doing either like making your habits better or making your habits worse. And so once you're aware of that, weirdly, you know, where this idea like first, it sounds like something I read, like I did read it in Charles Duhigg's books, but it actually came to me, it's the crazy, from like George Kennan's essay on American foreign policy, where Kennan is talking about like American diplomatic mistakes. And he says if you trace back every diplomatic mistake and everything that goes wrong for American foreign policy, you can see a whole series of decisions that lead up to it, right? And you can see that each bad decision leads to the next bad decision, leads to the next bad decision. And he said, and in a way that's super discouraging because when it means you make a bad decision, you may be setting in you may be setting in motion a chain of events that will lead to a catastrophe. But then he said, on the other hand, the opposite is true too, because it means that even if things are moving in the wrong direction, you can just do the next thing right and reverse it and begin a train in the next direction. And so I often think about that. And it was like this deep wisdom on, I mean, he was talking about like the Philippines in 1900. But that quote, it seared me and it made me think like, every time you make a choice about what you're going to do or how you're going to treat someone, like you're reinforcing a habit and you're setting forth a chain that goes forward. And so I do think about that in running. I do think about that in work. I do think about that in life. And sometimes when like stuff's going really badly, right? You can get overwhelmed, like, oh my God, like this is just going to hell, right? Like this is just going so badly right now. And you can get overwhelmed and want to quit. But you can also say, okay, like hold on. We're just gonna do the next thing right. Like today we're gonna do stuff right. And then like, and maybe tomorrow it'll be, you know, be able to do it again too. And then it just gives you a way of getting through. You know, today I'm going to be less sad than I was yesterday, right? Today I'm going to be less hurt by what's happening. Today I'm going to try to like, I made this big mistake. Today I'm going to try to make it a little bit better, right? And so it's a good way of getting through things.
You know, we're going to sort of draw it to a close here, but it occurs to me that that's a pretty good expression of leadership as well, because I think so many people think that great leadership is sort of a high drama affair, right? And in locker rooms, I think guys know that it's actually a very low drama affair. And so the Derek Jeters of the world or the Tom Bradys of the world, people in organizational leadership understand what you just expressed, which is that it's the compounding interest of small good decisions, right, as opposed to really high drama big decisions.
Right. It's not like Derek Jeter is not, like the Yankees aren't amazing when he's there because he's out there and like before the big game he's like screaming at them.
Right.
But it's because he's Derek Jeter, right?
He shows up every day.
Right?
And yeah.
I remember thinking this. I'm a Red Sox fan, so I root against Derek Jeter with all my heart. But I remember Game 7 of the 2004 playoffs, right? So that was when the Red Sox were down 3-0. They come back, and it's Game 7. And they're up like 11-3 or something. It's the 8th inning. And Derek Jeter is up. And you can tell he's like really focused. And like the other Yankees like seem beaten. And Derek Jeter like hits a single to left. And he's like, come on. And I was like, wow, that guy is impressive. Like his team they're going to blow a 3-0 lead, right? They're getting destroyed here in Game 7. Johnny Damon's already hit a grand slam. And Derek Jeter is like, he's doing the best he can in that situation, inspires teammates, and he knows they might win, and he knows he's going to set an example for 2005 when they might go win the World Series. So, yeah, bless that guy.
And those are the great leaders, or the habit people, right? One of Derek Jeter's performance coaches who went on he kind of cross-trained CEOs, and he told me that about Derek Jeter, he said, you know, it's not about who you can be in one big day, it's who you are. Like, can you be that guy the next day and the next day and the next day after that, and the next day after that. And so it sounds like maybe you've passed this on to your sons, the way your dad may have passed something like that on to you.
Well, I mean, my dad passed it on by doing the opposite, right? And like what my dad did is he was so chaotic, he made me want to not be chaotic, right? And like maybe what I'll do is like through my attitude, like my kids will like be more like my father, right? Like,
Yeah.
God help us. But no, it really does seem like it, my eldest son, works harder than I do, like the guy who loves to hike with me, right? I went down, I don't even know what city I was in this morning. I think but yesterday I was in New York, and I woke up at 6 to go work and do stuff. And I go downstairs, and like, he'd gone to bed at me after I'd gone to bed at, say, midnight, I'd been working, and he'd been up, and he was up before 6 still working. And I was like, or not still working, but he'd slept for whatever, from 1 to 5. I was like, wow, this kid is like on it, right? And then the other two, like I said, the middle kid really legit, he legit trains harder than I do and with more focus. So it's amazing to see.
Yeah.
And that guy, Zachary, the middle one, has promised he's going to run the New York Marathon. So he's not allowed to until he's 18. He said he would run it this year, and I was like, you're 15, you can't run it. But he's promised he's going to run when he's 18, so we're going to do it together.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
It'll be amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick. I really,
it's so much fun talking to you, Sally. It's amazing. And thank you, Lucas. Thanks for inviting us here. This is great.
It's a beautiful book. It really is. And one of the things that it describes is just the sheer beauty of getting somewhere under your own power, which is such a rare thing these days. So thank you for that experience.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you interviewed me. Thank you, everybody, for coming.